All right, good morning, everybody. So, if you looked at the last clip, I said that I was going to go through trauma bonding in deep detail in this week. So, I plan on going from, yesterday all the way into the end of this week, just talking about some traumatic things that happened in my life, bonding with situations that later on in my life I understood came from a place of deep seated trauma. And I stopped with college. I think that's the last place that I stopped with my grandmother. And like I said before, my grandmother was not supportive of me going to college. She was not supportive of me going off to the schools that I went off to because she saw that as me zenithing. She saw that as me, eventually leaving the family and eventually, you know, um, she pretty much made me turn me into a monster before I could even say anything. And I didn't think about that until I started to reflect on it. So my grandma used to tell a story to us as children. That was like a woman had cleaned up floors and cleaned houses for her child to go off to college. And she saved up enough money to send that child off to college. After that child had finished that first semester in college and came back on a train to go see their parents, right? See this mother, that the girl had showed up to the train station and she completely bypassed her mother and treated her like trash. What I did not understand when my grandma was telling me that story was that she had already put me in the place of this girl who had abandoned her mother, who had invested into her education, right? My grandmother would argue with me when there were nights in college that, I was hungry and didn't have food. I didn't have money in my account. My grandmother did not regularly put money in my account. And I had to get in where I fit in college. So it was like, I was up after that first week of like going to bed hungry one night, you realize, no, I gotta be up. Breakfast starts at 5, okay? And I needed to go ahead and go do me. You know what I'm saying? I had to make that move and get to the cafeteria on time because I knew I had no support at this point. My grandmother was so manipulative to the point that, even my high school counselors were not supportive of me going to Morehouse. So I had a whole community around me that saw greatness and they saw the need to try to destroy said greatness. And, that is not something that just I went through. I believe that, now when we get into college, we start to understand that for a lot of black college students, they go through the exact same thing in some dynamic or the other. We're all dealing with a level of trauma. And if you are a first generation graduate like me, a first generation, Morehouse student like me, or a first generation elite educated person, you're going to deal with the backlash of a community that's seeing you not come back to them the way they wanted you to stay with them. Because now all of a sudden, when you learn better, you do better. Because I didn't take college, like, even though I had my knocks in life, I fully took advantage of college. I saw it as a place to carve out a new life. I saw it as a place to really re examine myself, and it came from the Morehouse brochure, which basically said redefine yourself by redefining the world. And I put myself on a task of 4 years, 4 years, thank God, that happened because most students that go to Morehouse is some of them they're 5, some of them they're 10. I ain't playing with you. Some people play with college. I was not playing with college. That's an expensive trip. I'm not doing it. So also on top of that, I found out I was a victim of identity fraud. And the identity fraud was so out of this world that I had been a victim since I was 13 years old. Had no idea until we went into the financial aid office and we had to apply for loans because the majority of my tuition at Morehouse was paid for, fees and books were paid for through scholarship. The only loan I had to really take out in college was for housing, right? And since I had no family in Atlanta, that was the move I had to make. Now, with that being said, things got a little interesting because, with the identity fraud, my grandmother did not want to fix her credit. You know, with me being 19 years old, 20 years old, I didn't finish Morehouse until I was 22, right? So you can't qualify for credit on your own until you're 25. My credit had already been compromised since I was 13, which went back to an eviction that we went through when I was 12. Actually, 11 years old, turning 12. We went through an eviction. And so all of my personal information was out there to be used. And so my social security number and everything was out on the black market. It was used most likely to get an undocumented person work. Yes, an undocumented person got my identification. It was extremely hard when you're going through all of these, you know, having to argue with the credit bureau. Like, look, I was born in '86. How is this, you know, how was somebody able to access cable? They were able to get a house. They were able to do a whole lot of things with credit that they should have never had in the first place. I didn't have protection. On top of that, my grandmother's trauma with money was something that became a very real issue in my life. And for me, I'm fighting. That's my current battle in my life, is to understand the financial literacy piece that my grandmother didn't have. The financial literacy piece that I believe that when most black students are going to college, that's part of our issue. You know, is that we have parents who struggled financially, and you kind of kill a person, their goals and their dreams, because you're thinking financially. But instead of you thinking financially in a good way, you think of it in a negative. See, there were multiple occasions where my grandmother could have fixed her credit, because a lot of detriment that runs in our community as black people is because there are black people who are still stuck in a slave mentality. And it's a crab in a bucket mentality. And let's understand something about the crab. The crab, its natural habitat is not a bucket. So you're put in a position where you're going to fight with whoever tries to climb out. In fact, crabs have been known to basically drag somebody down, rip them apart, and kill them because they tried to make it out of a situation. This is the situation that most black people are dealing with. This is the traumatic experience that I had to deal with. You know, this is trauma that is overarching black people not being able to have opportunity. Said black people who had generations of no opportunity coming into a generation that has an opportunity and destroying that opportunity in front of your face. And what I'll get into in the next clip is not just the family trauma that you deal with, right? Because that's just one part of it. That's one part of the situation. I said that other people are traumatized in your environment too. So let's just say the college that I went to, Morehouse, had a good 2,000-3,000 students. Spelman had a good 2,000-3,000 students. Clark Atlanta probably had twice that amount because it's a university system as opposed to a college system like the other two. We're all in an environment of different socioeconomic incomes, different backgrounds, different regions of the world in which we come from. And we're all put into one place where we want to strive to be better, but we're still coming with our traumas. One thing that I wish they would have done in college more is that counseling services should have been more readily available for us. But it's coming from that thinking in the black community, the stigma that's around mental health, that someone must be crazy if they go and see a counselor. Someone must be, they're just not right. They're a social leper if you have to go get counseling. But trust me, I remember seeing a professor who was a pill popper. She had pens and she had her medicine bottles attached to said pens. So, I mean, clearly, you know, the talk of mental health needed to be a little bit more initiated. Because the thing is, when we're operating from places of trauma, it's not just us that's traumatized. In environments like that, it's also your professors. Because in the white world, they're traumatized, okay? They got their medication, okay? They have their blue pills. And they do it because they can. They don't receive the same stigma we do as black people. But I will get into that in the next clip. But as far as this clip is concerned, I hope it gave you a little insight to one layer of what that trauma bonding was. You know, leaving a family situation, stepping into a college situation where we'll get a little bit more deeply into it. Peace.